Motherhood, but not quite as we imagine. Thought-provoking, refreshing, straightforward, sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, but always honest. Welcome to School for Mothers, opening conversations we all need to have, exploring ways in which you can be fulfilled as a woman, once a mother. Now here is your host, mother of 10, Danusia Melina Durban.
Hello and welcome back to episode 18 of the School for Mothers podcast. I'm Danusia Melina Durban, your host, and the title for this week's episode is Worth. And my special guest is Wies Bratby. Wies is the founder of Women in Negotiation, and in her own words, she's a lawyer turned HR director turned women's butt kicker. I think she means that in the nicest possible way, promise. Wies is a mover and a shaker and a big positive force in women's lives, and I'm hoping to explore how she came to see the importance of negotiating pay in women's career success and how motherhood impacts negotiations. Now, I've had the pleasure of actually seeing Wies in front of a crowd of people in a workshop where she really talks about how there's a link between your negotiating pay and your worth. So that's something I'm really hoping that we will cover in detail. Oh, and I'm also wondering about how to negotiate with partners too, because we all know this is a bit of a deal breaker, something most of us are actually struggling with. And if it isn't partners, it'll be kids. So how do you negotiate with those? So come on then, let's dive into our conversation on worth. Listeners, part of the joy of the School for Mothers podcast is that it's global. It means that, the conversations I'm having are with women from all around the world, all of them mothers, all of them with big ideas for themselves and their dreams, bringing their dreams to the world. And one of the biggest challenges that I'm finding on this podcast is their names. And I can't exactly, say enough that I understand what having a, let's say, difficult or less ordinary name is like. After all, Danusia Melina Durban is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? I know you'll agree. So this week's guest is, she's one of those women. She's got a mouthful of a name. And actually, she is a really big woman. Her name is short, but wow, she is big. And so I thought I'd ask her to tutor me into saying her name because, well, most weeks, these wonderful women have to tell me how to say their names. So go on then, say your name.
Oh my goodness, this is hilarious. My name is Wies. That's it.
Wies.
Yeah,
Wies.
4 letters.
Yeah, and it's actually easy. So listeners, Wies Bratby is with us today, and today's podcast is on worth. Now, do you want to give us a bit of a backstory to how you got to where you are today?
Oh, do you have a minute? Or
Oh, God, yeah, we have a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
All right. Don't know how much detail you want. Background to me, I guess, is that indeed not from the UK, despite the last name. I was born in the Netherlands, born and bred in the Netherlands, became a lawyer there, met a boy whilst traveling in South America. His name was Ben Bratby. We fell in love. It was all very romantic. We were all very young. Ended up marrying him, and he moved to Amsterdam for me, which was wonderful because I studied law, so I'm a massive geek. And we were there for about 4 years before and had one monkey. We had one daughter there, Eva, our eldest. And then we moved to Hong Kong for an adventure, which was really fun and really cool. And then a couple of years ago, we moved back to Europe, and we're now based in Switzerland. In Hong Kong, I had another monkey, Izzy, our youngest. She's now 4, going on 40. Oh, my goodness. Mm-hmm. And we're now, as I said, we're now in Switzerland. My career has taken a bit of a U-turn after the law degree and work as a lawyer for many years in my native Netherlands. And then HR in Asia, mostly. I've now started a coaching and consulting company that teaches women to negotiate their worth, hence the title for this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. So quite a departure from your original career. Really interesting. And a global cultural, journey, adventure around the world. How nice. I couldn't help but notice that you called Ben a boy.
He is a boy. I'm now using my daughter's terms to describe the world. When you play 20 questions, they don't ask, is it a man or a woman? They go, is it a boy or a girl?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Beyonce is not a girl, okay? She's the queen. That's another discussion. No, yeah, a boy, yeah.
Well, that's what I was wanting to ask you. How do you feel when you're called a girl, if ever you're called a girl?
Yeah, it depends on who says it, right? It really depends on who uses that term. But it's actually funny that you're picking up on the boy thing, because for me, it's perfectly a normal term to use. And I think in part that might be because I'm not, a native English speaker. And so there's less sort of baggage that comes with that term. But I have to say, I use that term as well. This is a circle of trust, right? This is not going anywhere. Like, I hope it is.
What do you mean, this next bit? Well, it depends.
Yeah. This could get awkward in certain circles for me. But kind of circle of trust. This is a little story. So I used to work with the head of tax for $1 billion company, right? And we worked together every day, small room, big office, but the two of us were like intently working together. Anyway, people would come in and to try and find him all the time. He was incredibly popular. His signature was needed on a lot of documents. And so people would come in and go like, is X here? And I'd be like, no, boy's not here. And I wouldn't even think twice about it. But after like a couple months, people, certain people spoke up and were like, do you really think of him as the boy? Like, and I'm like, no, but he is, right? Anyway, yeah. So apparently I think less about these things than other people do. I put less, it has less meaning for me. But maybe it does. Maybe this is some Freudian slip and secretly I'm effed up in the head. Who knows?
No, I don't think I would just say I didn't hear that you were effed up in the head. I think it's interesting that there's a kind of subtle link here, isn't there? Or even unsubtle link to worth, in fact, because many women would argue that when they're called a girl, they're devalued, that actually they're very much a woman, that there is a time in their life when they are a little girl and then a young girl and then a woman, a full woman. And that's really what I was picking up on. And I think it's interesting. And it reminds me of when you described your little monkey, 4 going on 40. And there's this parallel stream where we say, oh, my son's 18 going on 5. But
it's the other direction for boys.
Yes, the other direction. So whereas females are always looking to be more mature, or at least whether they're looking to be, they seem to be, and kind of hold this responsibility and they grow so fast. With boys, just inherent in that phrase, 20 going on or 18, 20, 40 going on 15. I hear girlfriends say it about their husbands. Oh God, he's 45, but he's like a teenager.
Right.
And I just think it's really interesting. So I was just playing with, wow, I can hear some interesting kind of differences. And, I know that's not what, we were thinking. It's not money-based, but it's it's worth-based for me.
Wow. I hear you. And I think I agree, but I also think it's situational. And I don't think necessarily that when I talk about my old boss as the boy, I don't think there is much more behind it, or even with my husband, because I certainly wouldn't say that he is 40 going on 15. He is in fact way more mature than I am.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of men who are like that. So I'm not sure if that sort of applies in my situation or in my circle of friends and family. But it is an interesting thing. And I do agree, or I do, of course, have friends who discuss their partners in those terms. So I do know that there is a genre or school of thought that goes in that direction. I happen to have lucked out completely with my husband in that sense, that he is for sure the more mature one in our relationship, the more responsible, and in many, many areas of life, way better at things. And then there's other areas that I kick ass at and he really sucks at. So, we kind of even each other out in that respect.
Sounds a great partnership. Sounds really great. Yeah, it really does. I'm curious how you came to realize that negotiating pay is key to women's success.
It was actually a different realization. It was the realization that it was such an issue for them.
Oh, great. Wonderful. I love it when something like that gets tweaked because that's so much. Say that again for us.
Negotiating your worth is a massive problem for women. I mean, my business was born out of that realization. I didn't do this because I had this notion or this idea or this plan that I wanted to start my own business. I am doing it. I'm doing the work I'm doing because it's so needed. And how I found that out was because, so in this company that I worked for in Asia, I did HR. I set up HR for Asia for this organization. And so I traveled far and wide, actually across the world, not just Asia. And as part of HR, training was obviously a big thing. And so I wondered, how can I contribute? What can I teach others, right? As a trainer, how can I train people? And so the one thing I know a ton about is negotiating, because it's been my personal obsession since I was little. And, that's why I went into law, et cetera, et cetera. So I felt like this is the one subject I feel I can teach others something about. So I did. So wherever I went in the world, I would run a workshop on negotiating, and people loved it. Absolutely loved it. Like they would high five me every time. They would be like, oh my God, I'm going to talk to my boss and I'm going to talk to my landlord. And I'm going to talk to all the people. And then two things would happen afterwards. So the first is that wouldn't happen. They wouldn't actually have those conversations. And what I realized was that it is way more difficult to negotiate with your boss, with your landlord, with your partner, with whoever. If you hardly ever do it, then what I can teach you, the strategies, the techniques that I can teach you in 2 hours. Right? So that was the one thing. This is an incredibly difficult subject. And the second thing that happened every time, which is how I came to teach specifically women, was because wherever I was in the world, and literally whether I was in Vietnam or in China or in Indonesia or in Stockholm or in London or wherever, the women would gather around me afterwards. They would form a little circle around me and they would tell me the same thing, which is, I need this, but I suck at it. I find this so incredibly difficult. I had identical conversations with these women wherever I was. And so I came to realize, this is a big issue for anybody, but specifically for women. And why I chose to focus on career negotiations and salary negotiations is because those are the most difficult ones that you can have. The most difficult type of negotiation is a career negotiation, is a salary negotiation, because, it's in the context of an ongoing relationship. It is ultimately talking about the worth, the value of the work that you contribute, i.e., the value of you, right?
Yep.
And it has the biggest impact on your life. Negotiating a 5% salary increase at age 30 when you're making, say, 100K, over the course of 30 years, if you don't change anything but just get your annual, 4% increase, that 5-minute conversation that you have to get a 5% increase leads to 300K almost at the end of your career than if you didn't have that 5-minute conversation. Right? We're talking massive amounts of money, and especially when you consider that this is a super unrealistic scenario. And most women actually do change jobs over the course of their career. And so whether you negotiate those times or whether you just take the small increase that is given to you, as an incentive to take the job, the numbers go from, say, 300,000 to millions. So career negotiations, salary negotiations absolutely freaking matter. And so that's why I decided to teach this one, because I thought if you can nail the most difficult one, then everything after that's a piece of cake. If you're then talking to your partner, it's like a whole different ballgame. Or if you're then talking, if you're buying a house, like piece of freaking cake. So that was the background there, is really, let's take the hardest thing. Let's get really, really good at that, so that then anything that comes at you, is easy to do and you can manage on your own.
Absolutely.
And when we're talking about women needing to negotiate their worth, I think a lot of the background there for me was, I mean, I am a feminist, always have been. I have come to understand how important it is that as a woman, you are financially independent. And if I contribute to that independence a little bit by helping you at least, get paid really well for the work that you do, then, that makes me happy.
Oh, you and I know each other. So, I mean, I've had the privilege of, speaking in front of you, speaking not beside you yet, although I hope so,
Yay.
but also attending one of your workshops in London,
yes,
a few months ago,
fun.
which was great fun. I wasn't supposed to be in the room, but I became your assistant, in fact, didn't I? And so, I mean, it's funny. I'm so in love with your work. I'm cheering you on like an army of cheerleaders, because this idea of financial independence and it's not independence as in wealth as much as actual having the choices that women need to actually thrive in life via money, through money. As
Absolutely.
The primary caregivers, which, the majority who have children end up being the primary caregiver if there's a divorce, etc. And we know that there's many divorces. I don't have that stat at my fingertips, but we know that that's a big reality. Mm-hmm. So actually this money situation, I'll call it that, is vital. Career negotiation, salary negotiation is pivotal in women's lives.
Absolutely.
And because I have a specific relationship to this, we're kind of soul buddies around this, because I've been cheering myself on in this and schooling myself in this for years, but realizing that most women don't do this. And it's like one of the biggest sadnesses, because we disadvantage ourselves so seriously, particularly around divorce. And, because it's great when you've salaries, the two of you, but then if you do split, you have a one salary maybe. And then if you do at all, and then you're just you poor. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. Women are poorer. Women are poorer in the world because they don't know how to negotiate. And they take what's given them rather than negotiate. Mm-hmm. And so your work is absolutely thrilling, because, those strategies to actually get what women are worth.
Yeah. I actually want to jump in here and say that I don't just agree with the idea of, women end up poor, and that the possibility, the risk of that happening is a reason to, get really good at this and to take precautions, right? I would go a step further and say, not just the risk of that potentially happening, but really preempting that whole situation altogether.
Yes.
I think is a reason to be financially independent, or to at least have the possibility to get to that situation, right? So we'll always defend, and when I've had a couple of wines and it's a dinner party, I will, stand on a chair and have this kind of monologue. But that I think it's the most romantic thing in the history of the universe to be financially independent. To have an outside income that guarantees that you are not with your partner because you have to be. Because if you don't, you can't give your kids the life that you want, or you can't lead the life that you want, that you've gotten used to, whatever. I think it's incredibly romantic to choose every day, I am with you because I really want to be with you. You're the right person for me.
Yes.
And I think that's where I often get into discussions with particularly women, actually, where I honestly believe that it is a great idea to be able to be independent, potentially independent, right? That you need to focus on doing that, and that it will improve your relationship if there is no dependency one way or another. And it might not seem romantic. I remember, in fact, when Ben and I got married, that we had this discussion around a prenup, which that was a clash of, cultures. There was a lot there in those discussions, but he was so against this idea of a prenup. It was for him the most, unromantic thing in the world. Whereas for me, it just made complete sense to do this. And quite frankly, not from my side. What I brought in was a ton of student debt. And, if there was any money at any point, it was going to come from him and his family. So I kind of wanted to give him that opportunity of, protect that, right? So you don't feel like there would be any disadvantage to making this step with me, taking this step with me, and whatever happens down the line kind of thing. And for him, this was like massively, it was a super negative thing. And it really put a bomb for him under our relationship. That's history. We're golden. But coming back to that idea of sort of financial independence being a topic to care about. And it's funny, it is hysterical, in fact, to me and to a lot of people that know me very well, that I talk about money so much, because I don't give a shit about money. Like, literally,
yes.
I always say I'm a hippie. And maybe that's not completely true anymore. But I definitely, like, money to me means nothing. Like, it hasn't got, like, I don't know. I think I've been very fortunate in, especially after, I worked in these big ass law firms, etc. I've always had a very good income. So it's never been a concern. So I've been in a very privileged position, and I do realize that. But other than, making sure that there was enough, money doesn't drive me in any way, shape, or form. What it does mean to me, and what it, I think why I do end up talking about it, and, my entire business is focused on getting women in a really good financial position, is because that the salary that you earn is a representation of the value that, your company attaches to the work that you do, to your worth, right?
Yes.
And so that is why it matters. It means respect. It means opportunities. It means, as I said, value, basically. So that is why it matters. And the other side, why to me it matters so much, is that it does give you freedom. Having money gives you freedom. It gives you the freedom to choose a different life for yourself. It gives you the freedom to choose a different job. Right? If you are earning well for your current job but you don't really enjoy it, then making sure that you're earning enough here means that you can save up so that you can do without a job for a while as you're looking for something else, for example. But you're not tied into this one particular thing that you have to do, right? So for me, money is simply a means. And it's a means, it's a way to freedom and to having different options and to being able to do different things. And weirdly, it's a romantic thing, which is weird.
Yeah, I really love the take that you have on this, because it's, as you say, there is this whole romantic package that so many women succumb to or just follow, because it is the model that we've been taught, which is you meet a lovely guy, or clearly this is a highly heterosexual model. That's obvious. Yeah. You meet this guy, you fall in love, you almost meld into him. I can't think of the word, but you don't keep your separation. You absolutely integrate. And the integration, particularly around money, almost represents that you're solid and kind of, the more you can integrate, the more likely that you are that, you're going to stick together. It's such bullshit.
It is.
It really is, because in fact, for those of us who've experienced that, I've done so many different models of money management, money relationship with partners. Not that it's not the amount of partners, it's the experiments around what it feels like to have it all in one account with nothing else, what that does, to have separate accounts, to have separate incomes, to have, I really have experimented and what that does to the dynamics of a relationship. I know women that in some Facebook groups that I'm on that need to ask their husband to spend £10. It's just part of me just goes, wow, what do you mean you have to ask your husband if you can spend £10? And now, as I'm saying it, it's obvious, well, I don't know their circumstances. I don't know what their setup is, their agreements with one another, their actual amount of money they have. It's easy for us to talk, as you talked about, prenups. Something that came into my head was, geez, don't you have to have some money to have a prenup? Like you actually have to have a pot of money somewhere to actually even think of a prenup. I mean, most people are like, if you're in survival mode, like, you've got that, I've got that, bye. Mm-hmm. If we join together, we might actually survive. If we're on our own, we might not. Mm-hmm. So it's the worlds we're coming from. And I just really want to put that, and I know you've talked about privilege there earlier, but I mean, I think what would really serve listeners is, because I don't want to tantalize them. It's obvious. You've done a really good job because you're so brilliant at what you do, and you believe it, and I do, that, this is a vital thing that we have to negotiate. So where do you start? What are the 3 top things that you would say, women need to do? Mothers, not all of our listeners are mothers, by the way, so are all women. How do you negotiate?
Oh, top 3 tips.
Yeah.
Oh God, there is so much. And I don't want to hand out Band-Aids, as I always say, when people need surgery.
Exactly.
Right? So I don't want to reduce this to some kind of quick and dirty tips and tricks.
No.
I think the most important thing, and we have talked about this separately, is you need to have the conversation at home. If we're talking specifically about mothers and about work and negotiating that, I would say something that's completely underappreciated, I think, is the importance of being a team with your partner and making it work with your partner. And that begins at home, at the kitchen table, having that conversation and making sure that you're in this together and that you're supporting one another. Because what happens so unbelievably often is that if we come out of a situation where we've maybe stayed at home with the kids and we want to go back to work, or simply this has gone on from when we got together, maybe with our partner, we were both working, then kids came along and we dropped out of the workforce completely or part-time and we want to step it up again, whatever, if we have that kind of background, I think it takes a ton of work to make sure that you don't end up in a situation where you're taking the job, but you're also doing the work that you used to do, i.e. all the labor at home, right? All the chores, all the kid stuff, all the emotional labor. And what we know from the research is that is so much. Across the world, women take on 2/3 of that versus 1/3 of men. And when I share that statistics, there's a lot of women who burst out laughing and say, it's more like 99 to 1%, or, a variation of that. So we know that on average, women tend to do a lot more there. And I think it's a recipe for freaking disaster. It's a recipe for, resentment, for depression, for general tiredness, for dropping out of your career because it is too hard, for, general unhappiness, mental, physical tiredness, all of that for women. So I think that is one particular thing that I want to highlight so that people don't forget about it. I think it's essential that you're on the same page and that you share the workload at home.
Schoolformothers.com.
Listeners, I've forgotten to tell you that this episode is sponsored by MeSheets, my simple but incredibly effective system to get mothers not only doing the things we really want to, but as important, if not more, MeSheets reinstall us mothers bang smack in the center of our own lives. That's priceless. It's a digital download, very, very easy to get. The thing is, I know we all know how easy it is to meet everybody else's needs, but by the end of the day, pretty often to realize that we haven't actually met our own needs. We haven't got to the things that are really important to us and only us. So I created this really, really simple piece of technology that hundreds and hundreds of women are using every day around the world. So if you'd like to see if MeSheets will help you achieve more, focus on yourself, and keep yourself in the center of your life, all you need to do is go to schoolformothers.com/MeSheets. That's schoolformothers.com/MeSheets. Write to me and tell me how it's going. I love to hear from you because I've got big plans for actually making this into a program that will further teach you how to use these me sheets. It's going to be fun. I know it is.
Sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, always honest.
How do you get on the same page, Wies?
Do you have 15 hours? Because that is... No, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of taking the piss, but I'm kind of serious. Like, it's incredibly... it's obviously highly dependent on the relationship that you have with your partner, what the best approach there is. I think, generally speaking, when it comes to negotiating, we tend to focus on positions. So we tend to focus on the wants that we have versus the wants that somebody else has. So you might say, I want you to pick up the kids from school 5 days a week and I'll drop them off or something like that. Whereas that's not important for your partner, or not, they can't do that. So they'll say, I can do 2 days a week. And then you suddenly have this weirdo fight between 5 days or 2 days or, something like that, right? People talk about what it is that they want. Generally speaking, what the Harvard negotiation method, which is the sort of standard method on or work on negotiation. Highly recommend the book Getting to Yes.
Yep.
Terrible title, incredibly good book, which is the basis of this negotiation method. It's the basis of the work that I do. But what that teaches us is that we should focus on the interest, meaning the reasons behind the what's, right? So instead of saying, 5 versus 2 days a week of pickup, we explain why it's really important to us that we have the afternoons, that we don't need to rush in the afternoons because, XYZ reason. We explain that so that it's easier for the other side to explain why it is important that they get only 2 days, so to say, and that you together come to an agreement or come to an understanding. So the chance of an understanding happening is much more likely when you're talking about the reasons behind the positions than when you're only talking about the positions. When it's positions, it basically becomes a fist fight. It becomes like,
it's a tussle,
yeah,
isn't it? Who's strongest at wrestling?
Exactly, and it's no fun, right? And you usually end up with a compromise, which is the worst possible outcome. So this whole,
For both.
Yes, I mean, you both don't get what you want. Another word for compromise is lose-lose, because neither party gets what they set out to get. Whereas that cliche of a win-win agreement is much more likely to happen when you share why it is important, what it is that is important to you, right? Why your position matters to you, the background to it. And you're also intently focused on understanding the other side. That usually helps a lot, both in, the conversations that you have with your partner or the conversations that you have with your boss or whoever. In any negotiation situation, this usually helps change the dynamic and has a much bigger a chance of success.
Yeah, so do you have an example from your life, a domestic one?
Do I?
I bet you do.
You'd say so, right? I'm not sure if I right now have, so I was talking earlier about Ben and how freaking fortunate I was. And in sort of preparation for this talk, because I knew you'd be interested in that dynamic, right? Because of the School for Mothers being what it is, right? I thought about this and I figured that I feel incredibly fortunate to be with somebody who is genuinely my partner. And I will happily admit that in many, many instances, he does much more of the housework than I do. And I've kind of been sitting wondering, like, how come? And, the hilarious answer here would be like, I trained him well, right? That's kind of the throwaway comment that, we could use, and it'd be quite funny. But I think the reality is that there is definitely an element of my focus on this subject, on my focus for, fairness, which, is a result of my entire work history, right? As a lawyer, even in HR, that is a big thing. And it's part of my personality. That is a big driving force. So I definitely think that I'm more aware or more focused on this than, say, the average woman.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that I think my partner in of itself is just a pretty freaking incredible man. But also he has a much higher need for certainty and clarity in certain areas where I'm much more laissez-faire, where I'm, with things that don't matter so much to me do matter to him. And so that combination, I feel, has worked really well. for both me and for him, I would say, and has led to this very fortunate situation, I think, where we both, we're very equal partners in everything that we do. And we're just aware that we're both doing the things that we're really good at. I am much better at, doing arts and crafts and things with our daughters. I am incredibly bad at remembering that Tuesdays are for bringing the library books to school. Literally, my brain does not allow me to think about these things. And so there's, and this obviously goes for the million other things that you need to think of when you have kids and when you run a household together. And so, we kind of both try and play to our strength. And I can't really think now of an example where that came up massively. I do think as a result of the work that I've been doing and kind of, my focus on this is that over the years, we've just managed to get quite smart about this.
Well, yeah, you've clearly chosen one another as a great foil for each other and a great partnership. So the kinds of stress points that I imagine you hear with your clients may not be alive in your relationship, but I bet they are in others that you know about.
Yeah, I think what an interesting, and my brain is doing funky things here. So if I'm not answering your questions, then please, get me back on track in a minute. But I think what ultimately is the basis of a lot of this success is that it is an assumption on my part that we are equals. And I think that's where it starts. There is an assumption on my part that he's perfectly capable of doing the things that I find important. Maybe not in the same way as I do them, but, I'm a big believer in, there's this management theory that says either you define the goal, but not the way there, right? Not the means and how to get to the goal, or you define the means, but then you have no say in what the outcome is. Like you can't criticize the outcome in any way, shape, or form. Then it just is what it is. You can't do both, which is apparently what a lot of managers do. I've been fortunate not to have seen that, but that's what the feedback I get from a lot of my clients is like, whoa, yeah, that's hitting home. That's true. And so I'm a big believer in setting a goal and then trusting somebody to be able to deliver. I'm married a very smart guy. I work with really smart people. And so when I ask them to do something or when something needs to be done by them, I trust that they get to do that, right? Or that they do that. Wow, we're really going off piste here with this conversation, aren't we?
No,
I have a terrible memory, so I'm not quite sure where I was going with this. I guess my advice specifically for mothers from what I have learned over the years, both with my partner and through my clients and through conversations with friends, is that you've got to assume and you've got to know that your partner is capable of doing these things and then actually trust them to do it. And it might not be up to snuff. It might not be according to your standards, but who the hell said that your standards were the right ones? Right. And I'm now saying this in this way, and I'm really talking to myself because in the past I may have been slightly different. So, yeah.
Well, you're actually probably speaking for so many women who have a specific standard that they want everything done to, and hold on to that and hold on to the domestic sphere whilst actually kicking and screaming that it shouldn't be theirs.
Yeah.
It's like, this shouldn't be mine. Why am I doing this? When actually we really must take our hands off, things that don't really necessarily, they're not really ours. It's just that those spheres of work and family was historically the family and the domestic was ours. And that's where we got our primary identity from. And so many women still do adore that as their primary identity and their children. Typically, School for Mothers, are women who actually get a lot of their fulfillment and joy. And that's not about love for their kids. That's a given. It's about their own fulfillment through other identities and, a lot of them through work, through careers. So, but we also still got our hands firmly in the house.
Yeah.
Like there's nobody can do it like me, that kind of thing.
And on the one hand, I'm saying, let frickin' go, really. On the other hand, I do completely understand that is not easy, particularly, because of what you highlighted, that, historically, this was our domain. This is what we're, what we depended on as that was our job, right? That was our role in society. Going back even further, we can draw a straight line to caveman days, where our entire focus was on, the rest of the group, making sure that the group was okay. That was our role there. Men went out hunting. They needed to have very strong focus, killing that animal, bringing home the animal. That was their job. We needed to make sure that the group was okay. That was our role. And so we, however much we'd like to, we've never quite left all of that DNA behind. We've added a lot of nurture on top of that nature. And so here we are, which is why we end up in this split, or in this terrible situation, quite frankly, where we both have to kick ass at work. And then we both really internally and externally, we feel and we are told that we should be doing great at home. And that if our partners were to take over, it wouldn't be up to the standard that society has of us and that we definitely have of ourselves, of our households, right? And so we end up in this double bind where we it's really difficult. What is actually, I'd like to say something positive now because I feel like I've been talking everybody into a depression. What I think is also important is to realize that precisely because we have been raised, and, in caveman days, it was important that we focused on the rest of the group. Precisely because of that, we are excellent negotiators. Precisely because of that, we are perfectly capable of having the kind of career conversations that I want all women to have at the level that we need to have them at. And here's why. When we want to negotiate, this is coming back. I'm kind of trying to tie things together now. So
you're circling back. Yep.
Exactly. You asked earlier, what are your top tips, right, for having these negotiations?
Yep.
My first one is really focus on interest, not positions. Okay, very much, and have the conversation at home. I think we've kind of covered those. When we're taking that conversation to our workplace and we're saying negotiate in the workplace, what these women around the world were telling me, what my clients tell me, before they join my program is I suck at it. I'm crap at it. I cannot negotiate, right? I'm okay when I negotiate for others, when I have to do it on behalf of my company, when I have to defend my kids at school. I'm a freaking, mama bear. Don't even touch my parents. You know what I mean? So if it's for others, we're extremely good negotiators. We struggle when it comes to negotiating for ourselves. Again, we can completely explain, thinking about those caveman days, why that is, right? But precisely because we are so good at negotiating we've been raised this way and we carry this DNA, right, with this focus on others. That is why we are excellent negotiators, because to have a negotiation the right way, so not in that kind of, this fight that we discussed earlier, right, where who's the strongest here, right? But in what we call a meaningful conversation, where we're focused on both walking away happy, where we're focused on the relationship, where everybody wants to, end up with a bigger piece of the pie. What we need for that is excellent communication skills, right? We need empathy. We need to be able to listen well. We need antenna. We need to sense what is going on, right? And all of those qualities we have as mothers, as women. I mean, that is what we are amazing at. So when we realize that we have exactly what it takes to be a great negotiator, we just need to flip, one switch to realize that those qualities we can also use for ourselves, and we absolutely should use for ourselves. We might feel better about negotiating. We might feel more equipped and more ready. So another tip would be to heavily rely and be aware of the skill set that you bring to the table in order to have that, conversation the right way for a successful outcome, both for the other side and for yourself. We've got exactly what it takes.
Yeah, and this is one of the most exciting things about your work, isn't it? That you're not having to instill in women or equip them with skills that, they're really deficient in. And God, it could take you years to learn this. It's like we already have them. They're sitting within every woman's, skill set on a daily basis. Like, we know this stuff. We do it day in, day out. We have been since being young children.
and we are schooled and we are mistresses of it. You know, this is what we are, one of the things we are absolutely superb at. And then, you know, basically we do it for other people, but we don't do it for us.
No. That's the work
don't.
That's the thing. I mean, that's where I come in. That's the work that I do with my clients. I always say it's 80% mindset. And potentially even more than that, right? It is making the switch from, you know, for loathing, asking for yourself and really lacking the confidence to step up and say, you know what, I am worth that. You know what, I can do that. You know what, I want that, right? That is the work that we do. It isn't necessarily not knowing how to do it, because, I mean, we cover that in a very short space of time in the program, right? It's simply the techniques, the sort of step-by-step game plan that I've developed over the years. It's not freaking rocket science. I tell my clients that as well. It's like, that is not where the beauty is. That's not where the magic is. That's not really what you're here to learn. I can teach you that. That's also coincidentally why, you know, books and things, and why I'm so hesitant to give, you know, quick and dirty tips and advice, because it goes so much deeper than that, right? If I always say I work with incredibly smart women, the women who decide not to do my program, you know, they might say, well, I'm just going to read a book. Right? It's a lot less intensive. It's definitely a lot cheaper. You know, let me just read the book. And then sometimes they come back to me and they go like, yeah, that didn't work. Same as the workshops that I used to run, you know, for the company that I was in. In 2 or 3 hours, we would cover a whole lot of ground, and people would feel so empowered afterwards because they thought, I know what to do. That was what I was missing. I just didn't know what to do, right? But that's not it. You can read a book, you can follow a course, but if you don't change your mindset around your worth, if you don't change your confidence, I guarantee you, and I work with top women, I work with more juniors, but I also work with top level, you know, VPs, CEOs of organizations. And I know you do the same, right? These are really confident women when it comes to, you know, in the boardroom, they kick ass. But this particular subset of discussions, they still struggle at, because it's, you know, it's their internal sense of worth. It's their internal confidence. But the other thing that, you know, sort of part of that lacking that confidence is this real concern around, I don't know how to do it. And so part of it is really learning the skill, right? Reading the book or following the course, or, you know, learning the theory. Yeah. How does a woman negotiate, right? What are the things you say? How do you say them? When do you say them? All of that, right? That's one part. And it helps build your confidence. But the other thing that I think you absolutely need at that point is this realization that even without the theory, even without any of that, you have exactly what it takes to have a great negotiation with a great outcome. And, you know, another fear that I often hear is like, it will damage the relationship if I, you know, talk to my boss about wanting to work fewer hours or wanting to earn more money or wanting to do that project or a promotion or whatever it is. You know, they're going to think less of me, or they're going to hate me, or they're going to not like me, or whatever it is. But precisely because you are a woman and you're so attuned to all of this, that will never happen. Right? It won't happen, because you know exactly how to have these kind of conversations that leave everybody happy. The example particularly of, you know, I'm afraid that the relationship gets damaged. What I always tell them is, when you have one of those good conversations with your mother or with your partner or with a very good friend, you know, the ones that leave you feeling all fuzzy and really good about, you know, each other, and like, oh my God, we've set the world to rights, and oh my God, I love her. And, you know those conversations.
Yeah, totally.
Right? You both walk away feeling really good about the other side. And that's exactly the kind of conversation that you need to have with your boss. Right? Maybe there's no wine involved, and maybe, you know, you don't, you know, sort of trash man, or, you know, whatever it is that you've been doing. But it's a similar type of conversation. And it's a similar sort of skill set you bring to that conversation with a very similar outcome, namely that you feel better about each other. A lot of my clients say that's the biggest thing. There's like, I can't believe I got the results that I wanted, right? I got the pay rise, I got the promotion, I got all of that. But what's so weird is that my boss seems to look at me in a different way. He seems to now see me, right?
Well, I was just going to say what you're really describing in those really powerful conversations and relationships and connections that we build as women, and can be done with men too, obviously, is that we feel seen and we feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
So in a negotiation, it's not, the woman going in and she is seen and heard. And that's her, that's that other model, which is, I just want to be seen and heard. And do I get the promotion? Do I get the money? Do I, it's actually that it's a two-way, that we know how to see and hear people. That's part of our socialization as women. We're always other focused in terms of gauging what's going on and our intuition, all the things that you mentioned. So really it's a replication of what we do constantly, and it's a win-win. Absolutely. And I can understand that, top executives and particularly women are still troubled by some are still troubled by the art of negotiation. It's an ask, it's a wanting. And in some ways, you're just reminding me in this conversation, or you are reminding me of the fact that we so often don't ask for ourselves.
No.
It is for others. I know we've mentioned that already, but it's like it's almost like an appetite for ourselves, that we need to have our appetite, be aware of our appetite for what we want for ourselves. We have to have that wanting, a desire. And when we connect with that, whatever that is, and in this case, happens to be salary negotiation, let's say, or career negotiation. So we need to know, what is the role I'm going for? What is the salary that I want? And so many women don't. They take what is offered and feel lucky.
Exactly. They feel grateful and lucky that they got the job in the first place, that they're handed this opportunity to prove themselves. And you can probably hear from my voice, I'm not a big believer in any of this BS. So here's the thing. What I'm hearing you say is, there's two things. On the one hand, women need to first have this want, right? This realization of, this is what is important to me. And then the other thing, I think, is the difficulty that we have in conveying, in communicating these wants the proper way.
Yes, that's it. Yes. Having it and then communicating it.
Yeah.
They're very different things.
They're different things, and they're not necessarily easy. I won't say otherwise. It can be difficult. I think here's the important thing to remember, and this is something that may make it easier to take the step, is that when we negotiate for a pay rise, just to use that example, because it's kind of an unsexy example, it may feel, because of our socialization, because of what the world tells us, as a greedy thing, like we're greedy people for wanting more. Here's the thing, though. My clients come to me when they're on this downward spiral, where they feel undervalued. They may know, or they may think that they're being underpaid. They don't feel the love. They don't feel the respect. They're being overlooked for promotions. They're, not earning enough, et cetera, et cetera. And the weird thing that happens is they're on this downward spiral that feeds on itself, is what I call it, because the more depressed and resentful and annoyed and frustrated they get with themselves and with the company that they work for, the less reason their boss will have to give them a raise, to give them a promotion, because quite frankly, they're not bringing their best self to work. They're not doing their best work, right? Because low key, this frustration, this anger, this resentment is taking up their brain space, right? And so it gets worse and worse and worse. And so what I help them to do is to flip this into an upward spiral. And the upward spiral looks like this. Once they're able to communicate their needs, once they're able to have these conversations at the level that they need to have them at, and so they get the results, right? So they start doing the job in the setup that they want, if that's important to me. They get paid really well for what they do. They get the promotion. They're allowed to do the work and spread their wings and show what they can do. All of that good stuff. Once that starts happening, they show up with a new energy and a new excitement and a new inspiration and ideas and all of that wonderful stuff that doesn't just make their everyday working days more fun and better, but also brings massive value to the company, right? Tiny salary increase leads to massive output on your side, right? Totally worth it. So I can make the business case, and I'll do that every day of the week. I make the business case to companies where I say, listen, it is worth it to pay your people really well, not just because of the decrease in, turnover and the massive cost associated with that, but simply the output that people produce when they feel valued and feel seen and when they're in the right place in their work, right? Totally worth it. So you get into this upward spiral, and it is an upward spiral, again, that feeds on itself, because the more you show up with that energy, right, the better your work is, the more people see that, want some of that. And then you start having these really cool conversations that are really focused on, not on, you must pay me more, give me more money, I can do better, all of that. These conversations are about how much magic can we do together, right? They're simply focused on the work and on what needs doing and on how much goodness you can produce together. And then the money conversation kind of follows. It's a very easy conversation that you have at the end of that. So I guess why I'm giving this whole, this whole story, this whole background, is because I want to make sure that women understand that when they go to their bosses to ask for more money, they're not doing that for themselves. Sure, they are benefiting. Sure, their family is benefiting from it. But who's really benefiting? The company that they work for. The company is going to pay them more money. They are the true winners here. And I think as soon as you realize you're not a greedy bitch, you're not, a selfish person for wanting to be seen, for wanting to be paid well, for wanting to be valued, I think it makes it easier to actually have those conversations.
I think it means that it's really possible when we reframe it as how much magic can we do together. And when we realize we already have the skills, they're sitting inside of us, we might need some help to express them and learn some techniques for that, but that actually the real winners are the companies. And then we get to have the freedom to choose options in life as women and to be, freer. So I love everything you've said. Absolutely love it. And in the show notes, listeners will be able to follow where to find you, how to follow you, how to read what you write, and maybe attend things where you are or your courses and your programs. So we'll have all that handled. And all there is left to say is what a magnificent and magical conversation this has been. I'm deeply grateful, and I have no doubt that we'll get some emails about this particular conversation about worth. Thank you.
Thank you for having me and listening to me rant. It was a real pleasure.
Oh, I love your rants. Take care.
Bye.
What a fantastic podcast full of practical advice, ready to use wisdom, and oh my goodness, so much enthusiasm for her subject. Go take a look at Wies online. You'll find out where in the show notes. I'd love to hear what you thought about this episode. Why not be in touch at podcast@schoolformothers.com. Yes, that's podcast@schoolformothers.com. I guess this is a great moment to give a juicy shout out to a listener who recently reviewed School for Mothers podcast on iTunes. Here's what she said. I love listening to all these relatable, funny and inspiring women as I work from home, baking and cake decorating on my kid-free mornings. Thank you, School for Mothers. Keep up the excellent work. Wow, isn't that nice? That's from Hannah Charnock of hannahbakescakes.com. Thank you, Hannah, for your uplifting words. They really meant a lot to us. I'm so happy you're loving episodes as you create in your kitchen. It's something I do too. I listen to episodes of podcasts, not this one, obviously, that would be a bit weird. But I listen to podcasts when I'm cooking, and I doubt my creations are anything like yours. I had a little look. So, if you liked episode 14, called Erotic, with Sally Blenky, then you simply must listen into next week's episode. I'm joined by Stephanie Dominy, who's a commercial lawyer and blogger on sex, dating, kink, fashion, body image, and challenging society's expectations of women. The title of episode 19 is Laid. I really hope you'll join us, as trust me, I know it'll be a scorching hot conversation. Well, that's it till next week. Same time, same place. Meet me here. Thank you for joining us again. Here's to you.
Thank you for tuning in to the School for Mothers podcast. To continue the conversation and keep your dose of inspiration up, head over to schoolformothers.com/podcast, where you'll find bonus content from Danusia and her guests on habits, recommendations, books, best apps, time-saving secrets, life hacks, health, sleep and anything in between. That's schoolformothers.com/podcast.